Hi, Dr. Rob.
Hey, Tammy, how are you?
Good. I hear you've got some information that people are dying to know the answers to.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about infidelity, and someone actually wrote us, you don't know this, but from Scotland, because I get email from all over the world, and this woman said, I really wish you'd do a podcast on just plain old infidelity. Like, I get that you talk about addiction, compulsive behavior. So I thought I would take a minute and just talk about infidelity and maybe some of the differences between that and addiction, because I think that would be useful in a general way for everybody. So really quickly, infidelity is, I wrote a book on infidelity, about infidelity, called Out of the Doghouse. And one of the things I had to think about when I wrote that book is, what do you call somebody who cheats? What do you call, if they're not an addict, if they don't have a profound issue, but for whatever reason they decided to go and do that affair or sleeping around, what do you call them? And what I decided to call them, because I think it's really hopeful and useful in Out of the Doghouse, is immature. I think for someone who is in a committed relationship, which they have committed to monogamy around, and both partners are looking for that, that to just go out and cheat and not tell your partner is an immature act. And what I mean by that is, it's kind of like the kid who wants to take cookies out of the candy jar or cookie jar, but mom has said no. He doesn't at 7 years old say, oh, I get mom said no, so I'm not going to. Those of you who have kids, that kid is out there saying, when mom leaves the kitchen, I'm going to sneak in there and get some cookies, because that's what little kids do. And then when there's a trail of crumbs leading into the kid's room, he'll say, no, that had nothing to do with me. I don't know what you're talking about, mom. This is very much like what the men who cheat are thinking. What they don't have, what is immature about them, is healthy, mature people have this idea, I'll give you a therapy concept, of having your other in mind. So wherever I go, I am thinking about my spouse. Even when I go shopping, I see a shirt, I'm like, would that be good for me or for him? I always have him in mind. And so when I go around the world, whatever I'm doing, whenever I make a decision, I don't think, well, this is good, this is fun, I want to go do this, because the more mature thought is, what would be good for both of us? What's good for the relationship? And before I make this decision, having my partner in mind, meaning I don't go anywhere without thinking what would be best for them as well as me. And I think that in a mature relationship where there's not cheating going on, a partner is thinking, I don't want to do this because this would hurt them. I don't want to do this because this would create problems. They have that person in mind when they're going out and doing it. So that is kind of like, and by the way, to grow up is to keep your partner in mind, understand the hurt that it causes, understand the meaning of betrayal and how important trust is in your relationship. That can all be a part of growing. So for someone who's just cheated and doesn't really have an ongoing problem, they can grow up. They can be better people. They can change. And addicts can too, but it's a much more profound, harder piece of work. So quickly, what is addiction? Addiction is sexual or romantic behavior that is run off the rails in a sense that someone's life has become completely unmanageable. Now, if someone has an affair, I can imagine it feels pretty unmanageable for a short period of time. But what I'm saying is their sexual behavior and their romantic behavior, the addict, has left them with failure to function. They're not doing as well in some area of their life or multiple areas. Addicts are so busy doing their thing that they're not thinking about work or family or kids or relationships or community. So everything suffers. And even when things suffer, the addict doesn't say, oh, wow, my kids and spouse are really missing me and I can see that. The addict says, how can I keep doing what I'm doing and get away with it? Even the addict who's confronted on, let's say, having an affair, like someone who was cheating would, an addict is going to say, that never happened before, it'll never happen again. They're just going to lie their way out of it and keep doing what they're doing. Someone who's sort of just cheating will lie at first, but then they will start to come out with it and it'll come out. And that's pretty much it. So really, I guess the difference between an addict and someone who cheats is neither one are living in reality. Both are thinking what I'm going to do is okay and it's not going to hurt anyone as long as they don't find out. But the addict is doing it over and over and over again. They have a lot more secrets, a lot more, sorry, that's the dog, a lot more debt to pay. And most addicts have been doing these kinds of things, cheating, lying, acting out, since they were very young. And someone who's just had an affair, it may just be more of a, what's the word for it? Opportunistic thing. Like, I didn't mean to, but I was at a conference, we had a few drinks, and that's a very different thing than someone's in a persistent pattern of lying and keeping secrets. So I just wanted to touch on infidelity because, it isn't always true that we're addicts. Sometimes we just cheat. And what does that really mean? It means an immaturity and a lack of real connection to the partner when you leave the world. When you leave the house. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out. And I know we have questions and stuff. So if that's useful, why don't we get started?
It was, and we will. What advice can you give partners who are being told they're playing the victim card? Initial DD discovery date was 2 years ago, followed by 4 scattered discoveries by my own accord, not from his confessing or disclosure. He resents me for reading books, listening to podcasts, and my groups to find my own healing and recovery. It's disheartening that he doesn't believe his 17 years of acting out caused true trauma.
Well, it sounds like there's a couple of things in here, Tammy, because I think about someone who's really working on themselves or being attentive to their family as understanding the pain that they've caused. So most people who are really working on themselves, they have a lot of remorse. And let me just say that narcissistic people who are very self-focused, we may not have empathy for you. We may go and do something without thinking about how it's going to affect you. We do lack empathy. But narcissistic people, addicts often are, once we're confronted with what we've done, we feel bad about it. We have remorse. And remorse is what I can build on in treatment. If you feel badly about something, I don't want you to hate yourself, but I do want you to learn from that pain that you hurt yourself and someone else. Someone who doesn't have any empathy, but also doesn't have remorse and is not able to be brought to remorse is more of a psychopath or sociopath. And I can't work with those people because they not only don't feel that they can hurt you, but when they've hurt you, they don't even understand it. And quite frankly, they're quite tired of you talking about it because they want to be left alone and don't want to be bothered with your pain. And unless they're really in a lot of denial and just completely shut down, that would concern me about his level of ability to connect with you on a bunch of levels. Does that help, Tammy? Is that the right
Well,
answer?
it's help, but it's a little disheartening too, because it's,
He's disheartened.
I understand, but like I want to believe that there's hope for people to change, but I don't hear that he's, he does
Right,
not
2
seem like he's
years.
willing.
Not only that, but sorry, Tammy, not only that, but he's had 4 opportunities to be confronted, to be remorseful, to feel bad, to see what he's done. And all 4 times, not only has he not felt that, but he said, shut up. That's troubling to me for the partner. And I'm codependent. I want us to hang out with troubled people till we get better, but I don't want anyone to get abused. And if the situation is clearly laid out, how you would be harmed, what would let you down, what would disappoint you, and he says, I don't care, I'm going to keep doing that, leave me alone, that's a very serious issue for any relationship.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, next question. Hi, Dr. Weiss. I'm wondering, what is the purpose of a 12-step sponsor? What does a good and bad sponsor for sex love addiction look like? Any pointers on how to find a good sponsor for myself, a sex and love addict in recovery for 6 months? I've had a sponsor who told me things that were contrary to what you and other experts say, and I'm wondering where to go from here. I'm glad you're here and you're asking.
Tammy, do you want to start with that? Because I know you've worked and understand sponsorship just as well as I do.
I understand sponsorships more from, I had one really good sponsor, but I had really horrible sponsors too. So sponsorship.
What made them horrible or good?
Mine was dismissive, was not supportive, wasn't really willing to be there. Mm-hmm. It was female stuff. She felt like I was competition. I mean, it was just like really challenging. So, but I had an older woman who was like amazing and was very supportive, and just nurturing. So from that standpoint, it was, and she had some really long recovery and was really good. So to me, like my big thing with sponsors is remember they're human. And they're all on their own path. And ideally, they're a couple steps ahead of you. But a sponsorship relationship, is any length of time. And you find one that is working for you. Does that person have what you want? And that's a lot of what I would be looking at, is if that person is doing life the way you want to do it, then follow what's working for them. But if it's contrary to everything you're reading and learning from experts in the field, then finding somebody who is going to align with that, may be more beneficial. A couple more things. The drop-in groups on our site, there are people that find other sponsors within those groups. Those are points of connection, and you may find somebody that is more aligned with you, in those groups. So consider that.
Yeah, that's great, Tammy. I really appreciate that. I just have a few things to add. I think a sponsor is a role model. So they are someone who is already doing and acting in ways, like Tammy said, they have what you want, but I don't think it's just their marriage has worked out or they've stopped masturbating. I think that they're living their life in a way that you admire or aspire to. I think that's important. So if you have a sponsor whose belief system is very different than yours and maybe different than your spouse's, they're probably not a role model for you. And that would be my primary consideration. I think also these people are guides. They're just a little ahead of you, like Tammy said, and they maybe have pushed through those bushes before, so they can hold the branches back as you go through. Great metaphor, right? That worked really well.
It was really good. So, yeah.
And you know what really was important to me in my having sponsors? I don't know if you've experienced this, Tammy, but that they showed up. Like, when I needed help, if it was 3 a.m, or if I needed to stay at their house, if I needed to meet at midnight, I mean, it's a responsibility that they take on because they're willing to help under any circumstances, and they understand that. So I'm not sure if that meets your expectations, but I would say if you have certain goals and you believe in those goals and they're not ones your sponsor aspires to, you probably don't have the right sponsor. And one more thing, there are certainly sponsors who they're not in the same place as you. You know, they don't have the same things that they want. They're perfectly fine with something that would not be acceptable to you. Sometimes you might bring something up to a sponsor and they don't want to look at it for themselves. So they would rather say that's no big deal. But if it's a big deal for you, I would maybe look, a sponsor is just one of many people who can help you, and you can get support while you're looking for someone else, but I would.
I would too. How crucial is it that a sex porn addict have a qualified therapist? My husband feels that his LMFT therapist is just fine. This is the same therapist that told him to Google what a therapeutic disclosure should look like because he doesn't have the materials to help him, and was also the same person who said that he wanted to do this disclosure in 2 to 3 sessions. WTF? Why would someone want to draw out that kind of pain and trauma for both the addict and the partner? My CSAT says that it's a big no-no. What advice do you have for addicts who feel their unqualified therapists are just fine?
So Tammy, since you've talked to so many people who call you and say, I'm not happy with my therapy, I bet you have some answers for this that are also respectful of the people they're seeing. Because just because someone is not happy doesn't mean it isn't working. You know, so what are your thoughts about it?
Well, this is a little more complex because sometimes, you know, I mean, I had one earlier today that, you know, was worried that they had the right therapist, but really felt a good alliance with the therapist and that the therapist was helping, you know, so that's very different to me than a partner who's got a well-trained therapist. Let's put it that way. A well-trained therapist who has a framework for what a disclosure would be, working you know, with someone who hasn't had the training. I use this analogy all the time. You know, when I needed sinus surgery, I went to the specialist. I did not go to my GP. My GP was great for my normal routine things, but the sex addiction is a specialty. You know, the people that have a CSAT training have had intense training in this. They've done a lot of work. So most therapists aren't even trained in addiction, let alone sex addiction.
Or
so,
sex.
Yeah. Honestly, that's a very good point too. So it's very challenging, you know, and you also have the therapist and your husband aligning. And so then it feels like lines are being drawn in the sand. So what are your thoughts, Dr. Rob?
Well, I think that you should bring those people together. I mean, if there's a clear conflict between your couples work and your individual, then what I would do is go to my therapist and go to the couples therapist, and I'd like you to speak to each other. And, you know, it isn't your job to negotiate how they do the work. It's their job to figure that out. If your therapist or your husband's therapist, or if that LMFT isn't able to, so let me try it this way. The expert in this situation is the CSAT. They have the training. There are by the way, other trainings other than CSAT, but that's one of them. And so they should really be leading the case, leading the work. And if there's another therapist who's never done disclosure, doesn't understand it, that certainly they should defer. By the way, I think it's the couples therapist that does the best disclosure work. Yes, each therapist has to work with you individually on getting there, but you both have to sit in a room together. And so why not with the person you're both working with? So I think, you know, initially your alignments with therapy could be guided by putting everyone in the same room and figuring it out. And also seeing their willingness. Like sometimes the therapist, I don't want to talk to the other therapist. That would be a warning sign to me. The only problem is your husband has access and control over his therapy. And if you don't have a release to talk to that therapist, you can't. So the other suggestion I would have is go to therapy with him. Because, you know, I don't know if you know this, but well, you probably don't, but I've worked with a lot of men who are in trouble with their spouses, and boy, do they blame their spouses all through the therapy session. Oh, this person's this, they're fat, they're not available, they spend all my money, and before you know it, that therapist just thinks the spouse is horrible, because we really are abdicating for the person who's in the office with us, and sometimes that can make us really blind to what we don't know about. So I wouldn't necessarily blame the therapist. They know what they know. But I would think my husband's manipulative if he's splitting this between the couples therapist and your own. He should be abdicating for this to work, not to fall apart.
And to your point, if you're only hearing what his therapist says through him,
Right.
take it with a huge grain of salt, because
Right.
These lips can move and lie. So, okay, next question.
Can I say something else about that?
Sure.
Tammy is so right. I can't tell you how many clients have said, well, my therapist said, or my psychiatrist said, and then I ask them, because I'm curious, did you say, oh no, I never said anything like that? Addicts lie, addicts cover up their behavior, addicts cover their tracks. It's very important what Tammy said. I don't believe, and if your husband is an addict, if his lips are moving, I don't trust him. I trust behavior. When someone says, I'm committed to therapy, I'm committed to disclosure, I'm really working on this, I don't want you to be unhappy, and I'm going to do these things, and then they do those things, that's what I trust. I don't trust anything they say, including that what they say came from their therapist. Good point, Tim.
Next question. Am I wrong as a betrayed wife of a sex porn addict to expect that his sponsor be someone who has walked the walk of sex addiction? My husband feels that his work buddy is sufficient to be the person to call when he's triggered or slips. I disagree. I grew up in a family of addicts and feel that your accountability partner or sponsor needs to be someone who knows what life is like being a sex porn addict and be successful in his recovery. Please advise.
Do you think this person is going to support groups in 12-step? At all?
It does not sound like it. It just sounds like it's a work buddy and does not have a recovery path.
Okay, I wouldn't trust that person. And I'll tell you why. I don't believe the addicts are capable of really determining in the beginning what's healthy for them and what isn't. And that's why, as Tammy said, I really lean into professionals who know what they're doing. Because, and let me just say this to everyone, because we've brought it up. When you go to traditional psychotherapy because you're depressed, or because you lost your job, or because your mom died, or because your kid is ill, or because you got a promotion and you're not sure how to handle it. Most people go to therapy for emotional issues or problems in their relationships, but they're not addictions. Addictions are a behavioral problem. So we have a little bit of a rule in therapy. You can do any kind of therapy you want, and there are many different kinds when someone is struggling with issues other than a behavior. But if someone is eating compulsively, gambling compulsively, if they want to harm themselves and they're cutting on themselves, if they are gambling or gaming or sexing, that's a behavior. And that's an entirely different form of therapy. Most therapists are not necessarily trained to manage therapy. I hear from a lot of my friends who go through the kinds of training that we do, oh my goodness, I have to tell a client what to do? I have to challenge them? I have to question their thinking? This is not how most therapists are organized. We're good listeners, we're good reflectors, and we hopefully grow the person by kind of shaping them as we move forward. But that's not what addicts need. Addicts need, sit the fuck down and listen to this, because you're in real trouble. And if you don't listen to me, you're going to ruin your life. And here's what you need to do. Because Tammy's analogy was very good before. A cancer specialist is going to tell you to do all kinds of things you don't want to do. You got to do chemo, you got to do radiation, and if you went to your GP, they wouldn't have any idea. So I would not blame the therapist, but I would be looking for the right circumstances to make the situation work. One more thing. It's really hard when your spouse's therapist is someone else and they have that relationship, because it's easy for your husband to come along and say, hey, that's my therapy. That's my relationship. Why are you interfering? Why are you trying to control my therapy? And the answer is because you lie to me, because you keep secrets from me, because I don't have any trust in you. And I want to find out what's going on over there. And you have every right to.
Now, this particular question was about sponsor, and I don't hold to the sponsor and the betrayed partner.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No.
That was a point of clarification because we kind of circled around. So, okay.
I'm sorry.
No need to apologize.
Let me be clear about that.
Yeah.
Sponsors should not be friends. Sponsors shouldn't be family. Sponsors shouldn't be therapists. Sponsors are people you find in 12-step meetings because you're attending them because you need help. And you see someone who's saying a little bit of your story, but you're also hearing they've gotten better and you want to do what they did. it's a peer-to-peer relationship. It doesn't happen with a coworker. It doesn't happen with your mother. It happens with someone who is working on this too. And let me say something about that. Some people ask, why 12-step programs? What's the point? And one of the most important things is that you're with a bunch of people who have the very same issue as you do. You're not sitting in these 12-step meetings with a bunch of alcoholics or drug addicts. You're sitting with people who have the same problem as you. And so it's so much easier to feel safe and comfortable. And by the way, why would your husband want to talk to someone at work about his sex life and sexual problems? That seems kind of odd to me, and that would concern me. So yeah, you have a right to be concerned.
And one more piece of that is, somebody who's not in the 12-step program won't know how to work the steps, which is what the 12-step program is. And that's what a sponsor is somebody who's going to help you work those steps. The first 9 steps really help us clear the wreckage of our past. The final 3 steps give us a different path to live. I 100% love therapy, treatment, all of those other aspects, but there's something in doing those 12 steps is very freeing. And my work buddy is not gonna, well, my work buddies would, but most work buddies aren't gonna be, the language is different, so please, yeah, that's a bad choice. Next question is, how can I know or really find out if he has been completely honest and told me the extent of his addiction has went to without minimizing, etc.?
Well, that's kind of a difficult question to answer, because if you're in an environment kind of like we talked about, where you're seeing trained professionals and both you and your spouse are working toward what we call a formal disclosure, when your spouse sits down and tells you everything, not in graphic detail, but to give you a real sense of how often, how much money was spent over what period of time. If it's just the two of you sitting down, like I said, I don't trust anything addicts say. It's nothing against them, but I am one. And I know that if faced in a difficult situation, I'm going to try to lie my way out of it, and you heard someone earlier here who was talking about what we would call staggered disclosure. They got a little piece, then they got a little bit more. That's a nightmare for you guys. For the spouses who are just trying to put their lives back together and know where the bottom is, you think you found your foundation, and then it falls another 30 feet. And then you think you found, so I don't think it's a good idea to do these kinds of things just the two of you, because I don't trust your husband or your spouse to tell you the truth. And it will be even more devastating for you if you find more later. So the answer is to go see a professional who will go through a disclosure with you. Sometimes we use a polygraph. Sometimes spouses are so fearful that there are going to be more lies, and there's been endless lies, that, we'll do that just to make sure that you have the truth. And by the way, for the husband or wife who says, well, that's personal, that's private, it was fine to be personal and private until they cheated on you, then it's all bets are off. I've had interviewers ask me, when would you give up your code numbers to your Facebook and your sign-ins? Would you give that to your wife or husband? And my answer is no, I would not give that. I get to have a personal life and talk to friends. I often do. I might even complain about my marriage to a friend. I don't want my partner seeing that. But if I've cheated, if I have lied, if I have broken trust, then you have every right to look through my stuff, because you don't trust me.
One more thing about the disclosure is, without having it be a facilitated, you get all kinds of details that you can't unhear, or you get the visual that's stuck in your brains. And I get these calls all the time. I had one today where somebody had, I want to just share everything. I want to make sure, and she's asking and all of this, and it's horrible because you can't rewind that. You can't put the words back in your mouth. And now all these details are traumatizing, and your partner needs some trauma therapy to try to work through that. So next question, how long does it take for the brain to be rewired after decades of porn addiction?
Well, that's a challenging question. I don't really believe that the brain rewires. I think that's a kind of a concept that's come up in the porn community from some books that kind of have been written about, really not by professionals, but paraprofessionals. I understand the theory, but there is no, like, the brain resets at this point and then click, it's done. What you're really talking about is, if I have deeply ingrained behaviors over a long period of time, how do I assure myself that I'm going to be able to move away from them and make change last? And the answer is, you have to work on it every day of your life. It isn't something you get or achieve or you're there. It's a process. I mean, I've been in 12-step programs 35 years. I was in therapy for over 25. I had a lot of work to do. And if you're anything like me, you know, your life is a little bit messed up related to your behavior, at least it was. And we need guidance. We need support. We need help. Tammy, do you want to say something about that as well? Oh, I know what to say. So no, rewired, no. But slowly begin to think this is less important and that's more important. Yes. Under stress, will you always want to return to behavior? Yes. Part of the problem for porn addicts is they struggle to build intimate relationships and connections because some of them have spent so much time with the porn that being with a person isn't interesting or is overwhelming. Or so you really, it's not just about getting away from the porn. It's also about flooding yourself with life experiences that connect you. So when I talk to porn addicts, they say, well, I've been sitting at home and I haven't used the porn in 3 days, but it's driving me crazy. Now I know we're all sitting at home right now, but nonetheless, the goal here is not just to stop something, but to start something. We say in recovery that you really don't heal from an addiction by stopping things. That's part of it. But more of it is about how are you going to live your life now? So what is taking place of the porn? Are you going to be joining a club? Are you going to be taking a class? Are you going to be doing something fun? Are you going to play with your kids? You have to put the time into your life that you put into the porn. You can't just sit back and say, well, I'll watch TV and I won't look at the porn. Everything's going to be fine. And my brain will reset in 60 days. It doesn't work that way. Your brain only resets to the degree that you are actively working on this.
Great answer. Okay. Is it possible for a person to wait to act out on his sexual fantasies and have been faithful to a former spouse for many years, and then in his late 50s, he acts out by hiring prostitutes, etc.?
Sure. I mean, anything's possible. I run into lots of men who in their mid to late 50s have a bit of a crisis and a panic around age. And, you know, I don't know if you ladies know what it's like for us, but let me tell you, it's a little different than you guys because I think women often have real fear about aging much sooner than men do. We don't seem to have the same consequences as early. People still find us attractive. People still, you know, so, and it doesn't seem to matter whether we gain a few pounds. You guys still think we're, you know, it's much more concerned. Women seem to be much more concerned at rejection over age. So, but when we get there, when we hit that place, for some of us, it's all bets are off. I just got to do everything I can because I'm getting too old. I won't be able to do it later. And, you know, some people run off with a younger woman or man. Some people start affairs. So I would think it's not atypical, but I would be careful. First of all, if there's more history that you don't know about, because maybe there was stuff that went on before this. I just worked with a client today who has mental health issues, and his mental health disorder led him to a real manic phase where he was out there doing things in middle life that he had never done before, but he had emotional illness and he wasn't able to control it. So, you know, it really depends. You know, is your husband bipolar? Is he OCD? Is he ADD? You know, does he have other co-occurring issues that are mental health? Some of our clients struggle with Parkinson's, and Parkinson's medications disinhibit sexuality. We've run into a lot of people, oh my God, my husband needs help. He's losing his mind. He's having sex with everyone, but he's on L-Dopa. And it's because he's taking Parkinson's meds. And it's not, so you kind of have to rule out other physical stuff, other emotional stuff, and the history before you can get to what's going on today. I don't know what it is for him, but I would want to find out.
Next question. I'm going through sex addiction therapy. Now my wife asked for a divorce. My therapist recommended not to give disclosure letter until divorce finalizes. Your advice, please, should I disclose now or wait till divorce? That's an interesting way of putting it. A disclosure letter. I don't even, that's
okay, let me just take this one on.
Please.
We only do disclosure or any kind of revelation of someone's behavior if the couple is intending to stay together. There is no reason for me to give a list of infidelities to somebody's divorce lawyer. And that's what I'm doing when I do disclosure with a spouse who's on the way out the door. If you're breaking up, and I'm sorry that that's happening, even though your spouse feels like they deserve the answer and they really want to know and they've spent so many years with you, it doesn't matter. They are choosing to not be with you. And so there isn't anything productive that would come out of their knowing. they can be in grief about the loss of relationship and your infidelity, but they don't need to know the details because they're not going to continue with you as much as they would like to. So I never ever do disclosure with couples that are not intending to stay together.
Well, and I'm thinking, and the last thing you want is a list of things handed, you know, so now you've got documentation. I mean, I like, a disclosure is a process, not a letter to me, right?
And it's also in the service of something. The disclosure is in service of helping the relationship or helping to be better parents, or it's not in the service of supporting a breakup that you don't need any help with.
Next question. Michelle Mays is starting a new betrayed program. She is taking partners of both SA and infidelity cheating partners. Do you see these partners as needing the same support program? As betrayed due to SA, I'm hesitant because I believe addiction and infidelity are two different issues. Interesting that that's what you started off with today.
And here's what we started with.
Yes, I'd love to have you to know your thoughts before I commit to this program.
I really like Michelle Mays, and I think she does wonderful work, and I'm a fan. So I just want to, and we've done a podcast together.
We've done a podcast.
You know, I think that it makes sense to this degree. This is what I would think. If I was doing a short-term group on betrayal, like 4 to 6 weeks, I think that all the women or men who would go there would have a common background. Whether it's been 1,000 times or once, they have lost trust, they feel betrayed, they're hurt, and so working through that hurt and pain of initial discovery of betrayal, I think is germane to the partners of sex addicts as well. But after that initial working through the grief thing is over, then you go on different roads, because the sex addict has a problem for the rest of their lives. And it's challenging for spouses, because if your husband or wife had cancer, or if they had a bladder disease, you would be showing up no matter what, because they have a problem and you love them. But unfortunately, the problem they have is hurting you at the same time. So it's hard to be as empathic toward them as you might want to be. And by the way, I often say to our couples, don't lean on your husband or your wife. You're used to being able to do that, but they're the person who hurt you, or they're the person who doesn't trust you right now. So you're going to have to go outside the relationship to peer support, not to romance. And answering your question, so in the short term, I think it's fine. In the longer term, you're going to need help understanding how to live with his illness. And that's not something that someone who's had an affair has to deal with.
Next question. While going through sex addiction therapy, my wife now wants a divorce, but demands answers about my affairs, makes me watch videos, etc. Should I establish some boundaries as I continue through my therapy? This sounds somewhat like the last one, but so you see it, my wife wants a divorce, but demands answers about my affairs. And so that feels like I'm pushing for disclosure again.
Yeah, I think it's the same issue, which is if someone's asking for divorce, there's no reason to do disclosure. And you don't have to respond to their demands. You know, when am I going to know about this? And why don't I know this? And really, once they have left the relationship, and God love, everybody gets to do that if they want. And I certainly have spouses who say, I deserve this information no matter what. And I know that you feel really strongly about that. I get it. But if you do choose to leave, or you're not staying together, then disclosure is contraindicated. Okay,
so the next question. Hi, is recovery sex addict allowed any kind of sexy recall memory in morning thoughts? I'm struggling with this a bit. Past memories. Is that kind of euphoric recall?
I've never believed that we can control our thoughts in that way. So, and first of all, men, just to say it, men wake up, well, until about age mid-40s, men wake up with erections because we release the most testosterone in the morning right after we wake up. And so men often get morning erections, and with those erections come fantasies. I think this morning I was thinking about some sex as I was half awake, and you know, that's what it was. I don't think that we can control our thoughts. And what I am concerned about with an addict is, are they using those fantasies and thoughts as a bridge to acting out, as a bridge to returning to their former behavior? So, you know, I understand the desire to masturbate to those thoughts. If I start to have real thoughts about a former partner acting out, I'd probably stop the masturbation, because I don't want to reinforce those thoughts. But you can't help them from flitting through your head. It may well be, by the way, excuse me, Terry, it may well be that you need to stop masturbating for a while, because, you know, that's a problem for you and it's a problem for the relationship. So, you know, and I don't know if masturbation accompanies this or whether you just have these thoughts. But most men wake up with sexy thoughts until about 48, and then you don't have them anymore.
You're
You
over
just don't.
48. I know, well, I'm
But,
just going to say, but yeah. So,
but I want to say something else about that.
okay.
For many, many years, and still sometimes, when I can't sleep or I have a lot on my mind, if I start thinking about sex, I can fall asleep. And what that tells me is for some of us, the thoughts of sex are so soothing that they're a go-to for emotional comfort. And I would talk to men and be like, I don't know why I think about sex before I go to sleep, because it's probably the most relaxing thing for you to think about in some way. Because maybe for many of us, sex was something we soothed ourselves with when we were very little. So I can imagine being a comforting thought. If you don't have mom to pick you up and hold you, you might go into fantasies about something else. So I don't think you can control your thoughts. I do think you can control your actions.
Okay, next question. It's been 4 months since I heard partial discovery from my addict wife. Since then, I've received one level of dishonesty after another, but I'm trying to work on healing our relationship. We are both in therapy. It appears we have reached a new level, as I may now have an STD. Advice?
Well, actually, I'm going to ask Tammy to comment first, but I want to say one thing. It's really important that we see women who act out here. I think some of the spouses think, oh, it's a men's thing or just men do this. I ran treatment programs for women only, and we had 20, 30 women who were dealing with sex and food or sex and drugs, and the same kinds of damage that affect men affect women too. Now, women tend to more turn inward, like with depression and self-harm, but there are women who turn outward like men do with anger and sexual behavior. So I'm really kind of glad this is a male spouse. I'm glad to hear that. But Tammy, can you give some thoughts about this?
Well, and
It's pretty sad.
Yes, it is. But I wanted to touch on that you're in the rooms group. So Dr. Rob does a group on in the rooms on Friday nights at 6 p.m. And he has 200 to 300 people, and many of them are female. So it is very much we have a female sex and love addict group on Tuesday nights. We have a male
And a
partner group
male
on Tuesday
support
nights.
group for
Yeah,
men.
yeah. So we do understand that and he's done podcasts on that as well. So one of the things I noticed was, but I'm trying to work on healing our relationship. And the thing I thought was, you can't, just like any other partner in here, if the two of you aren't working on recovering or healing the relationship, it's really challenging. We're both in therapy. I don't know how that's going. I don't know the level of quality of that. Like Dr. Rob said, you have to change the behavior. But yeah, getting support around your trauma is really important. So your thoughts?
I think, Tammy, when I read this, I think of a relationship in serious crisis. Because as much as this man is trying to accommodate this woman's pain and struggle, I don't see that she's working as hard as he is. And,
Exactly.
We say this to spouses, and I say this to spouses, and I say this to any therapist. This is one of our lessons. We never want to work harder than you guys do. And I am just concerned that you're so motivated to want to make this well. In fact, so motivated that she may not have a lot of reason to get well. To be very honest, and I mean this is all kindness, sometimes we have to walk out the door in order for them to get how much we're hurt. So I don't hear a woman who really appreciates what she's done to you or to the relationship. And I'm deeply concerned that you're still being sexual with her if you don't trust her. You say you think she isn't really on a path that you want her on, but you don't get STDs through a breakfast conversation. So why are you being sexual with a woman you don't trust who's probably still lying to you, especially if it leads you to getting STDs? I believe if you were a woman, you would have killed this man already. But being a man, somehow you are trying to work this out with her. She's just as much of an addict as any of the guys are, and she needs to be confronted. My opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree, because I read the same thing. It's like, I'm working on healing our relationship. So
Not
next
going to
question.
happen.
Yeah. Married guy to a woman for 30 years, been acting out with guys. I come from an upbringing of divorce when I was young, and my father was not part of my life, and quickly followed by mental abuse of a stepfather that went into my teenage years. Not sure why I'm acting out with guys. Is this trauma driven?
Okay. There's a lot of questions in there.
Right. This is a very helpful topic. We hear often of guys acting out with guys. So,
I don't believe that anyone does anything sexually that doesn't have some appeal to them. And let me explain this to you. Do you mind, Tammy, if I get a little
please.
racing?
Yeah.
Okay. I could look at porn all day of women having sex with each other, and I could see boobs after boobs after boobs, and it wouldn't attract me because I'm not particularly interested in boobs. I like men, just how I'm built. Tammy could look at women all day long, and she probably wouldn't get excited either. So you're into what you're into, meaning that there has to be a part of you that this resonates with, and you feel that has pleasure and enjoys being with men. Whether you were introduced to that through trauma, that may be true. I was sexual with a man when I was younger, he abused me, and now I find myself interested in men, and I'm sure it is not unlikely that trauma can produce bisexual feelings and push you out of an area that you might have never, or push you into an area you might have never gone into without the trauma. But that doesn't mean it isn't a part of you, and it doesn't have meaning. Now, Tammy, we don't know this person. So this could be all the way from, and I hear all of this, all the way from, you know, my husband and I haven't had sex in 20 years, and I think he's having sex with men. And, you know, like he seems to be mostly interested in men. And we're not really a couple anymore. All the way to when he gets stressed, when he gets anxious, when he gets fearful, he runs out and has sex with men. I mean, each person who comes to us has a different problem. One of the reasons that we are experts and we are specialists is that we are treating, you know, I have people come in and say they hate their homosexuality, or they hate that they're interested in women or men, or they hate that they want to, I mean, there are so many issues that come into sexuality that people have shame about, they're confused about. So in the work, we're trying to help them look at the bigger picture and understand how all of this fits together. I don't know whether whether you're interested in men, whether, you know, I don't know what your issues are, but I think it's okay to question it. I'm just not sure where it comes from. And one more thing, I do work with lots of heterosexual men who are interested in men, and they hate themselves for it. And they think there must be something wrong with me, or else I wouldn't have this attraction. Well, let me tell you, bisexuality is really a thing. And some people really enjoy sex with both genders. It's not unusual, though, for a man who's really uncomfortable with having sex with men to split his life in half. So all the love and occasional sex goes to his spouse and family, and the men he keeps to casual, anonymous, never get to know them. And then a man will come to me and say, well, what's the deal with me? I don't like all these guys. That's not a split that's really fair. You know, if you're just using men for sex and putting all the love over here, you're not going to figure out who you are, because you're splitting yourself in half. So in any case, lots of answers to this question, many of which I can't give right now. But I don't think that simple abuse on any level, including sexual abuse, leads to someone having a lifelong preference. I just don't think that necessarily works that way.
Next question. My husband tells me that I am shaming him when I express my current hurt, when I feel unloved and unwanted emotionally. When he responds in a very dismissive, Stonewall kind of way, my hurt deepens, and then I bring up his adultery behavior with the married woman he was involved with, that I witnessed such a text messages and recorded phone conversations showing his empathy, care, interest for another person to remind him of what I need when he gave it away to her. This makes him even more angry, and he will tell me that he cannot give me what I need and want when I'm hostile like this. I feel like it's a catch-22. I cannot be the lovable person he wants in order to get what I need when I'm feeling unloved. My husband's adultery was discovered by me 2 years ago, and his porn addiction was found out to be an addiction 4 weeks ago.
Okay, so we stonewall you for a couple of reasons. One, we're narcissistic and we can't tolerate the confrontation. We don't want you to see us in a negative light. We can't tolerate it. And so we just get angry. Why are you picking on me? Why are you getting? Because we can't stand how you're making us look at ourselves. That's kind of narcissism. And then, you know, sociopathy would be, as we said before, or psychopathy would be, I neither care what I did to you, and I don't care that it hurt you because I don't care. And if you don't want to put up with it, I'll just go find another partner. That would be a different kind of thing. And then there are people who are protecting their behavior, which means I'm still kind of doing what you caught me for, and I'm not going to want to have this conversation with you because it might go too far and you'd find out other stuff. So I'm going to completely block you. In any of these cases, what's not happening is empathy for you, support for what you're going through. And unfortunately, as I said, most treatment is wife-driven or husband-driven, which means that he's not going to move as long as you're willing to put up with his abuse. And that's what I would call it. If you're sad and longing for connection and your husband says, shut the fuck up, that's abusive, or leave me alone, or I'm tired of you. So one of the most important things in intimate relationships is we learn how to meet each other's needs and support each other. Your husband is about as far from that as he can get. Now, why? I don't know. Is it any or all of the things I mentioned? I don't know. But Tammy can probably talk about how you can find out, get some help and support to figure it out.
Well, I couldn't help but think these are the kind of guys that we work with at Seeking Integrity Los Angeles. Right. And the other challenge, and I talk about this, in fact, I talked to somebody about this earlier today too, is, going to see a therapist, and, so doing individual therapy and group therapy every week and going to 12-step, all of that's great and you can get there. But these underlying issues and these problems, like that'll take 12 or 18 months, of diligently working on it. And in between, there you are feeling hurt, unloved, and kind of stuck in the middle. So
let me say something about Tammy, because I'll make a little plug
Please.
For our program as well. I can't tell you how many men who've come into treatment with us. This is absolutely true. And I say to them, you're not treating your partner well, you're being dismissive, you're not understanding their pain. I go through the same thing as I'm doing with you guys. And then you know what they say? Inevitably, I can hear this from you, but I could not hear it from my wife or my husband. And what they're saying is they've kind of learned to block you out. That's in their heads. It's like, enough, you're the nag, you're the complainer. And even though you're actually saying the right stuff, they have shut you out. And sometimes they come to treatment. For example, I had a man, I have to say this, he had 4 affairs. And he was a professional he was a helping professional. And when I first met with him, he said, I just want you to know I'm a really compassionate man. And I said, how could you in any way be compassionate if you've had 4 affairs? That's so non-compassionate. And he looked at me like I had 3 heads. And then he said, I think my wife has said that to me a few times. So what we do, first of all, we run a treatment center. And so this is our 20 seconds of plug for what we do. I run a treatment program. It is 2 to 4 weeks in length. It is not particularly expensive compared to some of the ones out there. I think after 25 years of doing this work, I'm pretty good at it, and we're really good at it. I work with a team that I've worked with for 15 years. Only we're not working in a treatment center that someone else runs. We're actually running our own, and I think we're doing a good job. SeekingIntegrity.com is the program. It's very small. We only see 6 or 8 people at the most. I'm not a big fan of programs that have 100 people in them. And Tammy, I don't know if I told you this today, but I talked to the second person today who'd been through, now these are 2 different major programs with 140 people and, all kinds of things going on, eating disorder, but really good, well-named programs. And neither of these men had an inkling as, well, let me put it back. These 2 men went to treatment at famous, really large treatment centers for their addiction. And no one ever identified that each of these men actually have some mental health problems. One of them has a little bit of Asperger's, so he has difficulty connecting. Another person's kind of bipolar. It's really important to me that comes in with the same issue doesn't mean it comes from the same place. Assessment and evaluation by people who know what they're doing is everything. So Seeking Integrity is always an option. Do we have a treatment program for women? Is that what that said? Tammy and I can recommend them. I have run them and had them, but I don't have one currently. I wanted to say one more thing about that question. Oops, the question's gone. So,
look in the answered.
I don't know how, you think I know how to do that?
Click on answered and it'll be in there because I just moved it to done.
That's all right. Let's keep moving. I don't,
okay.
It's not, probably not that important.
Okay. So what can I do to help my husband get by until his counseling appointment in 11 days? He has seen her twice and has and was very encouraged and doing well, only to find out I was still chatting online while I was acting like I was working a program for 3 days. I'm starting over today and really want to get better. I have a lot of abandonment, abuse, and neglect issues, and I'm going to deal with my counselor. She is a certified sex addiction specialist, but I've only had 1 meeting so far, and I was still acting out, and I wasn't honest with her about that. I called her today and told her about that.
About our work is that not only you're willing to be honest, but you're willing to actually do it. And so to call your therapist and say, I lied to you, woohoo, that's recovery. And I see it as that because you didn't have to do that. You could have just said, I'll leave them in the dark, but you made a decision to open up more about embarrassing things that you don't feel good about in order to get well. So I really admire that. I don't know. First of all, I don't know that someone has to wait 11 days for a counseling appointment, because I don't see why they can't make one for this week online. But if they can't, we run 3 groups. I mean, there's so many online groups. We run a bunch on sex and relationship healing, on In the Rooms, SAA. I mean, he could be at meetings and support groups all day long. So there are a lot of, I have a podcast called Sex, Love, and Addiction. I strongly recommend it. Podcasts are free, but we have over 400,000 downloads, because these topics of betrayal and sex, all of it is we have some pretty high level experts talking about the issues. And so let him listen to the podcast, send him on to sex and relationship healing, let him go to some 12-step groups. I would make a schedule with him for what he's going to do every day from now until the counseling. What do I want to say? So what I'm confused about in this question, it says, what can I do to help my husband get by? But then it says, I was still chatting online while I was acting out and working a program. So I'm a little confused. Do you think you can?
Well, I'm not 100% sure I can help, but what I think is this person is a female sex addict, and but the husband is struggling as well. So that was what we got a yes. That was, I read it correctly. So,
well, let's drag that husband and get him into the men's support group, because when you sit with it's again, this thing about being with people who are like you. Sitting with other people who have been betrayed, especially for the ladies, I've got to say, is such a reward. Not that you like hearing it, and not that it's fun to those conversations, but to realize that another attractive, intelligent person who's sitting across the room got cheated on, and so did that person and this person. It makes it so much easier to say, wow, I guess it really wasn't about me. And there's that gift, just like in 12-step programs, of that man or woman who's dealt with betrayal longer. And so they've worked further, they're further along than you, and you can get support.
And I just put in the chat, but I'll say this for general purposes too. I did find a male betrayed partner coach. So I don't know that person, but I have given that information to someone else. So I suggested that they have the male partner reach out to me so that I can make the connection. So
let me say something about that. If you want to find us, by the way, Tammy, we're launching a new podcast. It's the Rob and Tammy Show. It's called
Overcoming Betrayal and Trauma,
and
right?
Addiction. Overcoming Betrayal and Addiction. We can't remember the name of our podcast, but it's happening.
It's got a cool cover. We know that. So
I'm excited about it, and we'll be launching next week. But that's not related. The question exactly.
I didn't move that one. So are you ready for the next one though?
No, let me see one more thing about that. But I want to get better. Okay. First of all, just one more thing. It's impossible to have your partner feel any better about what's going on if you've just acted out. Even if you're very sincere and you really mean it, and he is just going to be hurt and pissed, and that's the way it goes. And I would not reassure him in any way by, I'm trying really hard and this really means something to me, because weren't you trying hard before and didn't with that? So I wouldn't try to make him feel any better about.
Okay, the next question. Hi, Dr. Weiss. I'm struggling with what you mentioned regarding addiction versus infidelity. I'm not sure where the line is, and can a sex addiction therapist help a person who does not have a true addiction?
Well, part of the problem is if you're used to working with rocks, everything looks like a rock, and so if you come in with infidelity, I would hope that a sex addiction therapist would be able to differentiate that. But they may or may not. I think of infidelity as something that happens occasionally, that happens in certain situations or in a certain kind of relationship. People who are unfaithful constantly have a serious problem. And it's not just they don't respect their partner, they have a problem. So if the infidelity is multiple over time, more than one person, or you were unfaithful in this relationship, now you're in this relationship, but you're still being unfaithful, your partner's not the problem. So I also hear this, by the way, and Tammy knows this. Sometimes I'll hear a man say this when he comes into my office, I've really got a problem. I just can't decide which one. And I know what he means. He means I'm in this relationship and I'm obsessed with this person and I must love one of them or maybe both, and I'm not sure who to be with. And by the way, my answer to that is neither one, because if you don't know how to be healthy in one relationship, maybe you don't need any relationship for a while until you get healthy. Excuse me, Deb.
Bless you.
I don't have COVID. That's just a sneeze.
Allergies are terrible right now.
It's true.
Ready for the next one?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I have a friend of 20 years and I suspect she is a love addict. I've been inviting her to listen to meetings and sharing stories about my journey with her. I want to help my friend, but I don't want to push her into recovery she isn't ready for. It's like standing on the bridge looking at those who haven't crossed over back their suffering. So it's a
Tammy,
really good question about like how do you throw a lifeline to somebody?
So with all your AA experiences, I want you to answer that. What do you do with a friend who they're still dabbling? By the way, we call this something, it's called contemplation. They think they might have a problem, I'm not really sure. They're contemplating it, but they're, like that. Well, how do you help someone like that, Tammy?
I have done this. I have said, I have something that I'd like to talk to you about. It could be difficult. Are you willing to have a conversation? And if they're open to it, then I at least have a spot to share with. I'm really concerned about you. I see some things that make me nervous, make me whatever, but I really say, I see some things. I see you're hurting. I see whatever it is I see. Mm-hmm. And then would you be open to some help? And because I've got some resources, and have a plan. But I hear what you're doing. You're already just inviting her to listen. And I don't know if she's listening or not, but I got to tell you, I knew I had an addiction before I was ready to get help. Like I already sure I'm an addict, wasn't willing to get help, but you're planting seeds. So even if it's like, okay, she's not quite ready yet, when the pain gets there, she's planted seeds, and she also knows that you're someone she can reach back out to. So what are your thoughts, Dr. Rob?
I just want to mention the names of some of the books that we recommend to female sex addicts, since there are a bunch of you here. There's a book called Ready to Heal by a woman named Kelly McDaniel. It's a more recent book. I think it's a very good one. There's a book called No Stones by a woman named Marnie Faree. And Marnie is a Christian, so it's more of a Christian slant on women and sex addiction. There's a woman named Erica Garza who wrote, God, what was her book on porn? I forget. Had some sexy title, but Erica Garza. Brenda Schaefer is another person who's written extensively about love and sex addiction. So I think one of the things that I would have handy is a book. If I wouldn't just, if I agree with Tammy, invite the person. I have concerns about you. I love you. Is there something, I see some things, would you be willing to hear them, even though they may be difficult? If that person says no, then you respect it. If they say yes, and you start talking about it, I would suggest pulling a book out and saying, if you want to go further with this, here's something that you might want to read. And that way, you're not like directing the information. They're taking from it what feels right to them. And that's probably how I would do that. Tammy, I want to go have dinner now. Do you think we can have dinner?
And it's time. We can have dinner. So
okay, folks, let me just, sorry, I was going to say you can find me on In the Rooms on Friday night at 6 o'clock California time. We also have an awful lot of groups and meetings and support on sex and relationship healing. And I'm really excited about our podcast going Betrayal and what is it? Okay, well, why can't we think of the name of our podcast?
Addiction and betrayal and trauma.
It's
overcoming betrayal.
Addiction.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll let you know when it launches.
It will be posted. If you haven't already registered on our sites, you'll get a notice if you do so. So, but reach out to us if you've got other questions. And I'm sorry for those questions we didn't get a chance to
answer. One more thing.
Tonight. Come back.
If you want to reach out, it's Tammy@seekingintegrity.com. If you have something really private and personal, you think, oh, I don't really want to write me at Rob@seekingintegrity.com. You're looking for a therapist. You're looking for a book. Tammy and I don't get kickbacks, but we do know an awful lot of people in the field who are doing good work, and we're glad to support you in finding them. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Dr. Rob.
Have a great night. Bye now.